A year ago, I went on a double date in Shanghai. My date was my best friend, Michelle, and there was also Riho and Ricky. And Riho and Ricky were this adorable couple that each time they would just make eye contact with each other, they would just smile and laugh. Now, I'm an American. My date, Michelle, is Korean American. Riho is Japanese. Ricky is Chinese. It was just a normal double date with friends. No big deal. We spoke Chinese and English and a few lessons of Japanese and Korean on the side. And later on, it got me really thinking about this dinner, and just actually made me realize how historically significant this dinner actually was. A Korean American, Japanese, and Chinese having a nice, pleasant dinner together, and there's no big deal. This handsome man is my grandpa when he was about my age, although a little bit more handsome, I think. My grandfather fought in World War II for the United States Navy. My grandfather, his interaction with Japan as a country was on enemy lines, and mine was just having a nice dinner with friends. This really blew me away after the more I thought about it. How come my grandfather's interaction just 2 generations ago from my family was interacting with people around the world at war as enemies, and mine was just having a nice dinner with friends? Now, this is something that I am quite a bit obsessed with, how things and people are brought together. What brings us all here together today? And I'm especially excited to speak in an audience today filled with people from all around the world. Now, largely this term can be summarized in the term globalization. Globalization is a term you may have heard before, and there's no really agreed upon definition for what it means, but largely we can attribute globalization to sort of an unstoppable force in the world that has occurred, especially in the past 50, 100 years, of people and things coming closer and closer together. That's sort of a universal agreed upon definition. Well, one of the things I study in college and I contribute my life to is something like this. Ooh. Unprecedented, courageous acts of globalization to make the world a better, safer place. Ooh, that's kind of a long phrase. Unprecedented, courageous, global acts of globalization make the world a better, safer place. Well, this is something important to me. I think about it every day. I contribute my life towards being this kind of person, but it's kind of a long phrase, so instead, if it's okay with everyone else, let's just call it a peach. So from now on, I'm going to refer to a peach as unprecedented, courageous acts of globalization to make the world a better, safer place. Does that sound okay? All right, great. So what can you tell by seeing me come out on this stage here today? Right now we're in northwestern China. You can tell I'm not from China. You can tell I'm speaking English, which means you can probably also tell I'm from America. So just that, you can also tell that it's the year 2016, which means you can quickly put together hundreds of years of history that have led up to this moment today, right now, who we are, and we're all in this room together. And none of us are at war with each other. At least not yet, but I'm not finished. So the world has changed a lot. I'm able to have dinner with people from around the world that my grandpa may have been at war with. But there's also many problems in the world. Right now, there's hundreds of millions of people living in global poverty. People today worry about whether or not they can feed their family. They worry for their lives, whether or not they have shelter, clean water. That's a fact. Hundreds of millions of people today, right now, all around the world. This graph is probably my favorite graph and probably the most impressive graph ever written, in my opinion, ever drawn. This graph is the percentage of the world population that has lived in global poverty, which means extreme global poverty, which is living on $1.90 per day, or about 12 yuan per day. In the 1980s, that number was above 40%. 40% of the world population is living in global poverty. Now, that number is close to 10%. I'm continually blown away by this chart. What has happened in the world that is radically transformed, pulling 1 billion people out of poverty. The world is so different now than it was before. Yes, a few hundred million people still living in poverty is a big issue, but it's not as big an issue as over 1 billion people living in poverty. Well, this is due to many things, of course. One of the greatest acts of eradicating global poverty is in China during the 1980s and 1990s, when China opened itself up to the world. During this time, as you probably know, China really opened up its gates, allowing the economy to welcome the outside world, connecting the world together. It's globalization at its finest. This act literally pulled hundreds of millions of people from living in poverty to living a more healthy, non-impoverished lifestyle. This is Muhammad Yunus, one of my heroes. He created microfinancing. This is something that's aimed at fighting global poverty. What it does is it provides small loans to people in impoverished areas, and they're able to use these small loans, mostly women who have trademarks, who have trade skills, who are able to turn their skills into a business, growing the economy in their area. That's a pretty cool peach, right? Also one of my heroes, Eleanor Roosevelt. Her peach was to promote human rights. I mean, she did many, many things, but one of them was for human rights. And she was instrumental in passing the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. This was a document that allowed all the powerful nations in the world to agree on a certain standard of human rights that every person deserves. These are the Wright brothers. As you know, they invented modern flight. I'm sure I bet all of us in this room can appreciate that. They had a pretty cool peach, I think. So that leads me to me. What's my peach? Well, it's certainly not as impressive as them, but my goal in life is to help maintain and improve the relationship between America and China. As I was growing up, I had started to notice that many of my things, many of my clothes, my toys, all said made in China. Yet I lived in California. This really started to get my curiosity going. Why was so much a part of my life made in China? Yet I had never been to China before. And it led me to study it throughout college and really become obsessed with how the American and Chinese relationship has progressed over the years and how it will progress over the next 100 years. This is my peach. I work every day towards trying to improve this relationship because it's becoming more and more important every day. Right now, I work as an educational consultant, which is sort of a fancy way of saying I help Chinese high school students apply to college in America. It's a small but very meaningful step for me to help bridge the gap between America and China. And also, I get to meet and work with some of the most bright, smart, and most intelligent people I've ever met. So I'm in this habit of talking about how things have changed, even how some phrases of definitions have changed. So unprecedented courageous global acts of globalization to make the world a better place is now a peach. What about border? This is also a term that's becoming changed. Normally we think of a border as maybe a wall or a fence, a divide between two countries. I like to think of it, and I hope you can think of it, as a gateway, an opportunity, a way of seeing there's a border there, I want to cross it and see what's on the other side. I want them to come back on this side too. Global poverty is a major issue. Hundreds of millions of people are living in global poverty today. I see this as a challenge to help make the world a better place. A change maker. It took me a while to realize that I could be a change maker, even if at very small amounts. Just teaching someone a new thing that I've learned before, making someone laugh. Each and every one of us is a change maker, whether we like it or not. And lastly, global citizen. Do you consider yourself a global citizen? If you're wearing clothes that are made in a different country, if you're in a different country from where you're from, if you're listening to a TED Talk in a language that you may not be your first language, well, I think all of us here are global citizens. I think we should recognize that our citizenship to our country and our citizenship to the world are equally, if not more important to each other. Again, all of us are global citizen. Peach, one more time. This is also part of my philosophy on happiness. I feel that instead of chasing happiness itself, I try to chase what makes me happy. And in a way, I can tell making a difference, having an impact in the world, that's what makes me happy. So for me, peach equals happiness. So what's your peach? Thank you.